And the reason why this is awkward is not only am I the speaker for this room, I'm also the breakout sponsor for this room. So you get to see my logo everywhere. So congratulations, thanks for being here. I love my K, it's my favorite thing in the world. Well, other than my rather useless dog. And he's, look, I'm going to throw that out there. He is not worth much except being awfully darn cute. And, you know, he's just a stupid dog. And that's not true at all. I love that dude. So anyway, all right, so we're going to get going. This session is called Who Gets Sued? Now, some of you know the answer to who gets sued. Some of you do not. If you know the answer, I don't want to hear it right now. I want you to keep it to yourself, and there's a reason for that. Because at the end, we're all, if you don't know what the answer to who gets sued is, we're all going to know at the end. All right, so let's see here. I want to ask a couple of different things. So actually, I'm all over the place. My apologies. I'm hopped up on all kinds of medications today. Some of them have me a little loopy. Some of them have me a little down. Some of them high. So we're all working in tandem here. Some of you have seen my commercial that I've done around town, and it's called Who Gets Sued? So I'm going to lay out that scenario here. So you're building a hotel. Who are the different trades that you're going to see that are going to be that are going to be tasked with actually building a hotel? So give me a few of them. Any trade, any service that might be appropriate when you're building a brand new hotel. Architect. Surveyor. Attorney, always attorney. Attorneys are involved in everything, as we'll learn. What else?
Developer.
The developer?
Inspectors.
All right.
HVAC guy?
Yes, you got to have your HVAC. Okay. So, but you'll have your engineers, your surveyors. You'll have your GC, you'll have your what's that flat stuff on the ground that's really hard? Concrete. You have your concrete. You'll have your framers, your plumbers. All of these folks are involved in building this. So I want you to keep in mind that everybody who has a hand in construction. Now think about who has their hand in management. So you might have your management firms, you'll have your CPAs, your security, your all of these things. So when we're going through all of these, I want you to keep all of these different industries. It's not just the guys with the hammers. It's not just the guys behind the keyboards. There's everybody involved that's going to be brought into a scenario here. So we're going to go ahead and let's see. Let's just start with a couple of definitions here. So being sued does not mean you are guilty, but maybe you are. You may not have done anything wrong. Oh, there's somebody who's gets sued. I didn't hit my button quick enough. There we go. So are you guilty? Being sued doesn't mean you did anything wrong, but maybe you did. And I even have some folks that tell me that if you've been in business any length of time and you haven't been sued, you're not trying real hard at all. So you need to work harder in your business. You can be a threat to somebody and they'll sue you, right? So if you're not working too hard, you're not a threat to anybody. All right, so let's see here. My apologies. Like I said, I am all over the place, so this is not going to be as clean as I would normally like to do it. So in all the cases we're talking about here, there's this whole idea in the courts, right? You're innocent until proven guilty. Bull hockey. So if you're accused of something, right now you're trying to prove that you're not guilty of it, right? What does that take? It takes money. Takes an attorney, it takes time, it takes sleepless nights, it takes effort. So when you're being sued, and it's not even sued. Look, I'm using the word suing. It's not just necessarily even the word sue. You get a letter from an attorney that says, "Hey, you're at fault." You get a letter from a client that says, "Hey, my house burned down and it's your fault." You may not have gotten anything legal yet, but you have those sleepless nights. You're wondering, do I have the right coverage? Do I have the right policies and the procedures and the plan in place to make sure that I get to stay a business owner? Who here is a business owner? Did you put blood into your business yet? Put some sweat, some tears? So you put all of that effort into that business, and it takes nothing that you did wrong for you to lose it. So that's the reason why we want to understand where the dangers come from, how we can protect ourselves, and how we can make sure that we get to stay a business owner after something happens. All right. So we're going to play a game. Everybody's this is great. We're playing a game. Is it general liability? Woo! Wow. All right. Unfortunately, that's actually the appropriate response there, which was silence from the audience. So we're going to play most people's favorite game, and we're going to figure out if the scenarios we lay out here are general liability. So the first scenario here is John and Tim are employed as mechanics at a local garage. Unfortunately, John and Tim do not get along and are always arguing. John is accidentally run over and injured by Tim while Tim is test driving a customer's vehicle while in for repairs. So we've got a couple of different things going on there. We got the injury, was it the injury to John? We've got the damage to the customer's vehicle. And is that all we have? Hang on, my notes. Oh yeah. And we also have the lawsuit that's going to come from John to the business because an employee ran him over. So, is it general liability? Do y'all know what general liability is? Do you care what general liability is? Yes. So, great answer, because most people eyes glaze over like, no, I really don't. Most of your answers were appropriate. So general liability is simply, it's not coverage that covers you generally. Think of your physical injury to third party. So when we're talking liabilities, we're talking third party. We're not talking first party. So if you run into a tree in your personal car and your car is damaged, liability that you have on your personal policy doesn't cover that. The damage to the tree you have caused would be covered by your liability. So keep that in mind. It's third-party liability. So when we're talking about a scenario like this, John is accidentally, we don't know if he actually did it on purpose or not, but John is run over by Tim. John says Tim did it on purpose. This is harassment. Is that general liability? It is not. That is employment practice liability insurance. All right? So the vehicle that Tim is driving is injured by John's body hitting into it. That's kind of morbid, right? Is that general liability? No, it's not, even though that's third-party coverage, because, again, this is getting into the weeds. This is just to kind of give us a basis here. When you're talking about property in your care, it now becomes a first-party coverage. That vehicle is in your care. It is now a first-party coverage. So in order for you to be, it's your care, custody, and control, in order for there to be coverage for it, you have to have additional endorsements. The damage, let's see here, the damage done to John himself. He's now injured. He can't work. He's in the hospital. Is that third party or first party? Well, to John, it's first party. That would be workers' compensation. So your general liability does not cover injury to your employees. That's the reason why it's important to have the right coverage. Now that you business owners understand that it's not all general liability, because the reason why I put this up here is one of the biggest things I hear from a lot of folks is that general liability covers me generally. I need an umbrella policy just to cover everything, and that's not the definition of an umbrella. So whenever you're talking about policies for your business, if you have a friend that owns a business and they just say, well, I got general liability and we're covered, it's very likely they're not. They might be. Who knows? There's really good agents out there that do a really good job. All right. So Lisa's an architect and was tasked with the design of a new hotel. Weird. Working late, she mistakenly put a decimal where a comma should have been in her calculations, resulting in a catastrophic failure of the structure years later. So she's now brought in a lawsuit because she put the wrong number there. So she's now sued. Is that general liability? And the reason it's not, so some of you are smarter than me and you all need to stop it. The reason it's not is now, remember I said physical third party for the most part. There's variation, contract liability, whatever, but for the most part in these cases we're talking about physical liability. This is intellectual. When we're talking about intellectual, we're talking professional liability, errors and omissions, E&O. For these purposes, those are all exactly the same. So you're talking about malpractice for a doctor, for an attorney. If you says an attorney did not handle my divorce correctly, which would never happen, right? Never ever. Or anything along those lines. So, all right. If y'all don't get the joke on this one, I'm going to be really upset of all y'all. All right, so Fiddler Roofing Company was hired and completed install of a new roof for a 30-year-old home. 1 week after the work was completed, a large storm blew through. Though no damage is visible to the newly installed roof, damage to the interior walls, floors, and furniture occurred due to water intrusion. General liability?
Did the water come from the roof or it had?
Well, okay, we're going to assume, great question. Are you an attorney too? All right. So great question. We're going to assume that water came in through the roof or come from the top down. Is that general liability? In this case, yes. That is what, for a roofing company, a general liability is designed to cover, the damage caused by the work or the services performed. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Fiddler Roofing Company's claims the roof was installed incorrectly, which allowed for the water intrusion. A third-party inspection was completed and confirms the homeowner's suspicions. The roof was done wrong. So now it's got to be pulled back off and reinstalled, and the homeowner saying your insurance company has to cover that. Is that general liability? That's not. That's an exclusion. That's virtually every policy you're going to find out there in general liability. So, do we have any contractors or construction in here? So, and this is the case with virtually every policy, however, but it's easy to see in construction. Did you know that your work is not covered under a general liability policy? And that sounds scary. Your work? What that means is the work that they did, so the roof they put on was their work, is not covered. So for them to be paid again by the insurance company to take off the room and put a roof and put on a new one is not covered under a liability policy. So if somebody puts in a water heater, it bursts, and they have to go in and replace that water heater, the actual water heater itself is not a liability claim. It is it's a contractor professional claim, is workmanship is what it would be. And then, but the damage caused by that bursting water heater, the sheetrock, the floors, the furniture, all of that jazz, that's covered under general liability. All right, I know this is a lot more. We got just a little bit more to go on that. So, okay, so that kind of gave us a good idea of where we are on Fiddler Roofing Company. So this is the oh, no, I'm sorry, we do have one more, don't we? No, we're not. Wait, there we go. Okay. Fiddler Roofing Company hired a subcontractor to repair a roof. An employee to the subcontractor fell off the roof and suffered serious injuries and is suing the homeowner, Fiddler Roofing Company, and the subcontractor for that employee's injuries. Not an employee of the roofing company, an employee of the subcontractor. Is that general liability? The answer to that is maybe. It just depends on how the policy is endorsed. And most of your contractor general liability policies do not include injury to a subcontractor's employees. However, if you're going to come to me, we're going to talk about that, and we're going to make sure we have a carrier that can add that, because that's a huge exposure, especially when you're a contractual relationship between the sub, yourself, and maybe a GC that you're working at. So I know this is contractor related. A lot of the stuff we do is in the construction and contractor world. But yes, ma'am.
I have a question about, talking to somebody about, how everybody's trying to sell you solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
And they were saying, somebody else said, well, if you get your solar panels, then your warranty is no good anymore.
Exactly.
So do you?
What?
Like a new,
For your roof?
yeah, because the solar panel people could possibly mess up what they.
That could be a lawsuit against a solar panel if they're voiding out any warranties without disclosure. Now, if they're disclosing that we're voiding your warranty, you're taking the risk, then the onus is on you. That'd be my thought anyway. So, my advice, if you want solar, build a pergola out behind your house and put the solar on that and just have it wired in. Do that. Don't put it directly to your house. There's all kinds of insurance issues that come along with that. So, all right, we're done with that because everybody's like, oh my gosh, can we get off the examples? They're awful. No, I'm not getting off of them. I got so many more of them, and they're going to be great. All right, so but as you can see, there's the importance of the right coverage. Most small business owners, when you start a business, where do you go? When you started your business, where did you go for your insurance?
From a referral.
Okay, that's weird. Usually what happens is you go to the person who sold you your home and auto, right? That's usually the case because they do insurance. Insurance is insurance, and it's not. It's kind of like going to your residential realtor and saying, hey, I want to buy this $6 million commercial building. Can you help me with it? The expertise in this and the knowledge base is different. Now, that's not to say they can't do it, and there's not agents and there's not real estate agents, insurance agents that can't do it all. But more often than not, there's a different level of service. So it's important to understand why that general liability doesn't cover you generally, that there's more to it to make sure that you've got the right coverages. So one of and our attorney will understand this one here, common law defense. Who here knows what common law defense is? Okay, we have one person. This is an important definition here that everybody needs to understand because everything in insurance comes back to this. So defense to suits for liability claims based on common law, such as defense included but are not limited to assumption of risk, so you assume it from a contract, lack of proximate cause, we can't figure out exactly how it occurred, last clear chance where you're given an opportunity to get out of that exposure, and no negligence on the part of the defendant. So I didn't actually have anything to do with it. So with these claims or with these concepts in mind, the next few scenarios that we're going to go through, you're going to see how some of these play out. And sometimes you lose that common law defense. But before we do that, we're going to go through a couple of business stats. These are fun because if you're in business, remember how I said that if you're not in business and you're not getting sued, you're not trying hard enough? Well, this will kind of give you a little bit of detail here. Approximately 90% of your small businesses will see at least one lawsuit during its existence. That seems like a really big number, right? Now, when we're saying lawsuits, we're not talking about big, giant, multi-million-dollar claims. Maybe we are. But we are talking about you owe me money, and it may be $500, but you owe it to me, and I'm going to court. All right. Claims include slip and fall, patent infringements are huge, contract disputes are huge, employee related, you go into a Starbucks and they're mean to you and you walk out and you want to sue them. Those happen quite often because Starbucks is very mean to me. They're not. But the biggest thing here is there's 32.5 million small businesses in the United States. Now, the SBA, they describe small businesses as businesses under 500 employees. Do we have any businesses in the room that had over 500 employees? That's probably accurate because there's only about another 200,000 businesses that actually have more than 500 employees. So if you're one of them in here, we really need to talk. We need to be friends. All right, so, but with that 32.5, there's 12 million business lawsuits brought in every single year. So that, again, that doesn't mean settled, that doesn't mean multi-million, but that means these are lawsuits that are filed with the court every single year. So the chances of you being brought into something is pretty high. A lot of those are frivolous, and a lot of those shouldn't go to court, but sometimes they go to court anyway, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. And if you want to see where I got that information, I've got the links to the website where we did our research and all that. So again, not all claims will result in a lawsuit. So just because you have a claim somebody says and makes a demand of you doesn't mean it's actually going to court. So that's why I want to say when everybody gets sued, it may not be a suit, but somebody's going to make a claim against you, right? All right. So we're going to go to a couple of real life examples here. So I love this picture so much because that Burger King is definitely flame grilled. And the example I give here is I have a real life example of a client. Now his job was to do nothing but go into different restaurants and replace and or repair the little thermal receipt, those receipt machines. You know what I'm talking about? When you get your paper and you leave them in your car too long, you get hot, you can't read them anymore. Those type of machines. So his job was to go in there and just simply replace or repair. He went into a Sonic one day. He pulled the plug, pulled it off of the back of the machine that went to his POS. He plugged a new one back in, plugged it into the wall, left. That night, the place burned flat to the ground, and they pointed back at the plug, at the outlet that he put a plug into. Remember, he didn't touch the outlet. He's not an electrician. He's not licensed. He didn't rewire anything. He just went right in there. Well, this thing burned flat to the ground. Now you have not only the liability side for the construction of the restaurant, you have the lost revenues while it's down, you have payrolls, you have all of these things that go into a restaurant not being able to operate. Well, guess who got sued? He did. Now, after about $45,000 in legal fees and about 6 months, they finally dropped him from the case and said, no, there's no proximate cause. You touched it, but you are not the cause of it. Hallelujah, he didn't have to. But if he didn't have insurance, if he didn't have the right insurance policy, guess what he would have had to do? He's got to defend it himself. Now, do you think if you're doing it on your own that you can do it for $45,000, or you think you're going to have to pay a whole heck of a lot more because you don't have attorneys sitting there on retainer already? It's the reason why it's important. He didn't do anything wrong. He would have still had to pay out. And it could have, he was a small business, could have taken him down. He may not have been able to recover. All right. So we're going to get to that and why that's important here in just a second. So a claim doesn't have to be big. It can be small. And so let's say that you're driving, or you have an employee that's driving a vehicle and they rear end the back of somebody. So if they rear end the back of that dude and they break their arm. Now the employee's driving their own vehicle. They rear end a dude, they break their arm. Who's going to get sued on that? Probably nobody. It's a broken arm, big deal. Employee has insurance, no big deal. What happens if the employee does major damage? So the example that this comes in, and the reason why this is related to an auto accident, this is, I've changed the names to protect the innocent. I've changed kind of the scenario and location to protect the innocent. But in the Northeast, a client of mine that's in here in the area, or here in the Texas area, it's a big area. I don't know if you've ever seen a map. They were tasked with installing a new router and a new switch for a client up in Maryland. Now, when so what they did is they're not located here. They were tasked here, and they do business all over the U.S. They hired a company to actually go in and do this. So they subbed that work out through a firm that does this. They went there. The employee switched out the router, was not supposed to take the router with them, was supposed to leave it on site. Instead, so after he fixed the IT issues, he was leaving, going back to his hotel. He brought the router with him, and then on the way back to his hotel, he nailed a car, and sadly, one child was killed, and another child was put into. What's what I'm looking for? They're paraplegic for the remainder of their life. Absolutely horrible situation. So how is my client responsible for that loss? You want to know why she was responsible for it? Because he took the router with her, or with him. If he had left it on site, when he left that job, he would have been off the clock. Since he still had the router with him, he's now on the clock. So in a situation like that, every single person that had their hand on that router, on that service, was called, was brought into that lawsuit. Now, sometimes we think of lawsuits as frivolous, and we think of my clients should not be held responsible for that. But the courts are going to look at what is the implication? Where can we find restitution for this client, or for this family that lost their family? So the courts will hang on to that pretty hot and heavy. But what it made it worse for my insured, we've all heard about the corporate veil, right? Well, you can pierce the corporate veil if you don't do the right things within your business. So what happened to her is they're piercing the corporate veil, and the reason they can get through that is she had a business entity with a partner, and when the partner left, they changed entity names, but the contract they had with the actual company still retained the old name. So they're saying she was trying to avoid liability by having a different entity actually do the services versus what was actually contracted. They're piercing the corporate veil. We're talking millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. And it's going to pay out. because an employee didn't do what he was, or not an employee, a employee of a subcontractor didn't do his job. And it brought, so again, you don't have to do anything wrong in order to be brought in that lawsuit. Yes, sir.
Adam, a quick question on that, not to get too far into the weeds on it, but say that same scenario, they left the router, but they've got tools in the car. We have a lot of contractors that are taking tools. But does that impact that scenario?
It can. It can. And she still may have been brought into it, but that was the reason the court said, you're still here. If it wasn't for this, the court said we would have let you out. But because of this, you're still here. Now, the case can be made that, hey, he was going to a hotel, which means when you're out of town for work, going to a hotel at night, are you actually ever off the clock? The jury's out on that, no pun intended about the court. But they could have still brought him in, but that was per the court.
What they were paying their
That was the check mark. All right. So the next one is, I know we talked about, unfortunately, a situation, 10 minutes? Perfect. Where we had a child that did not make it. Well, unfortunately, the next scenario, oh no, this is not it at all. We're going to go, somebody mixed up my slides. All right, that's fun. Okay, so this is kind of go to low, high, low. All right. So remember what we talked about, the common law defense? So the proximate cause, and that's where they were able to still hang on the liability for the person that had a networking company. All right. Whenever you're talking about employee injury, you're talking about workers' compensation. And did you know? So people ask me all the time, what can I do so I don't get sued? The biggest answer is nothing. You can't do anything to not get sued. You can just make sure you have the right protection. There is one thing out there that actually limits somebody's ability to file a lawsuit against you, and that's as an employee injury, and that's if you actually carry workers' compensation. Now, Texas does not require you to purchase workers' compensation. Whether you agree with that or not, that is the law. They allow small businesses to operate without work comp. That does put some of the liability back on homeowners. If they have somebody there working without work comp, there's nothing to fall back on. All right, but if you're an employee, like Brian's an employee of mine, if he gets in a car accident on the way home, it's not my fault. Well, it might be. It's not my fault. You can't sue me. Do you know that? Now, you can sue the work comp company, but you can't sue me because I have work comp. But what happens if I said I didn't want work comp? Well, then I lose the ability to apply common law defense. So the idea of them coming on the job site and being high as a kite, drunk as a skunk, stripped down naked, douse themselves in gasoline and set themselves on fire. If that's what an employee does when they come in, doesn't matter. You're still responsible because you opted out of the system. You lost your common law defense by not having workers' compensation. That whole scenario was meant to be before I was talking about children that unfortunately passed away. So that's why it's kind of weird. But I love the picture of the dude with the drugs in the office. That's one of my favorite things at all. If you don't appreciate that, I don't know what to tell you. All right, so this scenario here, a lot of you folks have probably heard what happened in Florida a few years ago, and this is the Champlain Towers. This is that condo association. So anybody here does not know what happened here? Good, because it was big, big, big news. And I've got some stats on this one here. This was a building that was completed in 1981. During this incident on June 24th in 2021, so a little over a year, 98 people died that night. Now, they're saying they don't have a definitive cause of collapse. There's some pretty good ideas of what happened. And so in a situation like this, there's nobody who has enough insurance. You're talking about the association, the condo association did not have enough insurance. The management firm did not have enough insurance. Any inspection companies didn't have enough insurance. Nobody had enough. So what happens is everybody gets brought into that lawsuit, right? So whether or not you actually were a cause of, if you put your finger anywhere associated with that business, you're going to get brought in a lawsuit. You've got cases where there's a sunset, so which means basically the ability for a lawsuit has expired. In certain circumstances, that gets waived. So it gets really, really tricky. So there was prior inspections that show that there were major issues needed to be addressed. Why is that important? They knew there was an issue. Okay? But just because you knew there was an issue, what happens if you're doing everything? Okay, I've got an issue, and you jump on immediately to start taking care of it. Does that absolve you from any liability? It doesn't. All right. Like I said, nobody has enough insurance. $1.2 billion in settlements. Where did all that money come from? Unless you've studied this case, I bet you have no clue. Anybody have any ideas? All right, it will surprise you. So, almost $500 million, a little over $500 million from Securitas, a very large security company. Why is a security company taking on $500 million worth of that? Any clue? So they're working security that night. They have an all points evacuation alarm. They knew for 10 minutes there was an issue because things started moving and shifted, and they never hit the alarm to get people out.
Oh, wow.
Holy cow. Do you think the guard that was on duty there is not kicking their own rear end almost on daily? $500 million, they said, and they didn't even go to court. They said, here. This is another crazy one. 680 million of it come from a development right next door. You're talking about the GCs, the inspection companies, the engineers, all of these folks that were involved in this project, this 87 Park that's right next door, because they say that contributed to the timing of the loss, because they had just constructed, they were shaking the ground and doing all the things that they need to do to build right next door. And if they hadn't done that, then that building wouldn't collapse at that time. Still would have collapsed because the inspection company came back and said, you got a major failure issue, and if you don't take care of it, it's going to fall down. Well, guess what? That inspection company paid out millions of dollars too, because apparently they didn't blow the whistle out enough. So all of these people, the development next door, do they have any idea that what they were building, this big, beautiful new condo association, or this new building right next door, would bring them into something that big? There's no way they would have known that. So again, having it's impossible to have all the right coverages. It's impossible to do all the right things. But insurance paid more than half of this. Businesses paid quite a bit of it. It's amazing to see where the money comes in on something like this, because the condo association probably had $5 million in liability, and it paid out the max. So responding policies, nobody really cares about that. Now this is for everybody. Your general liabilities, your property.
I'm a broker in Florida and real estate, and now all condominium associations are required to have 100% of reserves because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is good, because I have sold in Florida for years, and condominiums are a big issue in Florida.
That's right. It's changed the law there. It is absolutely crazy. So if you want to build there, good luck. So all that to say is you can do all the planning in the world. You can have the best coaches, you can practice, you can do everything that you need to do in life, and you'll still find yourself in a really precarious position. I know how to get out of this position, I know what I do, but sometimes you just need a little bit of help to get you out of that position. And even then, sometimes when you're talking about a $1.2 billion loss. Hello? There you go. Still doesn't work. It goes straight into the water. So You can have all the planning that you have in the world, and things just keep going off the rails. And unless you understand where your risks are for your business, then you can be taken down by the simplest, silliest thing that you never thought of. And that's what's going to destroy this dream that you built, this blood, sweat, and tears that you put into your business. So when we say who gets sued, it is? Everybody. Do that again. Everybody. That's exactly right. All right, thank y'all so much. My name is Adam Koch, Koch Insurance Group. And if you have any questions, I don't know if we have time for questions.